Hey friends, Christy here with Little Roots Ranch, and today we are going to be making one of my favorite items, which is old-fashioned, long-boiled apple jelly. Oh, it's so good and so simple, so easy to make, and I'm so excited for this video. Okay, so speaking of the video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few just little things to keep in mind before we start. Then I'm going to verbally go through the steps. And then I'm going to physically go through the steps with you to give you a better idea of exactly the steps. So it's great timing. I actually have been selling out of my current long boiled apple jelly, and I need to make more, and I thought I should bring Inz along with me because it's so simple to make, whether you're canning it like I will be doing or even making it for your fridge. Okay, so to get a few things just settled out. So there's apple jelly and there's apple jam. One thing to note, if you're brand new to the jelly jam making circle, is that jelly is made with the fruit juice of the fruit, right? Whereas jam is made with the actual fruit. So fruit juice implies straining, and so that's why your jellies are generally a little bit more clear and stuff like that. Moving on, nowadays, a lot of jelly in home kitchens and definitely in stores is made with commercial pectin. One of the things that makes this recipe old-fashioned is the long boiling method. And so what that means is that we don't add commercial pectin. We rely on the natural pectin within the fruit, which apples are a great source, especially young and immature apples. And so what we're going to do is long boil the fruit that will release all of the pectin, and it'll set by itself. This recipe is so delicious, but really cool because it only has technically three ingredients. So apples, of course, sugar, and then a little bit of water to get it started. So I wanted to cover a few of those things. Now I'm going to verbally, quickly go through a few of the steps, and then we'll go through them together. Okay, so in order to make your apple jelly with the non-pectin way, what you want to do is you want to go get your apples. Any amount is fine. I'll get to this in just a moment, but the size of your batch depends on the amount of juice that you end up with. So again, I'll get to that in a second. But go and get however many apples you have, or your tree, or if you're purchasing apples. Then you're going to want to rinse them. If there's any blemishes or anything, you can cut those out. But you don't have to worry about peeling them or coring them. We will be cutting them up, or for me, I cut them in half and then put them in the food processor. But then when you get all your apples done, you're gonna put them in a pot. I happen to have a larger pot. Key word about the pot, thick bottomed pan. That is incredibly important, and you'll hear me say it several times. It prevents burning, which is not the end of the world for making the jelly, but cleaning up after, trust me, you only make that mistake a few times. Anyways, we're gonna put it into the pan and cover it till it's almost covered, just barely covered with water. Then we're gonna bring it to a boil till the apples are just soft. Depending on the size of your batch, will obviously depend on how long that takes, but you'll see them start to kind of expand. Then you're gonna turn the heat off and you're gonna strain them. Now the straining part on the surface is easy, but it takes a little bit longer because it's gonna take about 4 to 5 hours. Then once you've got your juice, you're gonna do for every 1 cup of juice that you have, you're gonna do 3/4 cup of sugar. Now, I know that might sound like a lot of sugar to some, but the ratio is actually pretty important. And if you do less sugar, which a lot of folks do, you have to boil more to get it more concentrated. And so your end product is still the same, if that makes sense. So regardless of what level of sugar you use, like if you use less, your quantity will be less, so the sugar will still be the same per serving. Anywho, so you're going to boil that and until it reaches gel stage or 220 degrees, and we'll get to that in just a second, or well, when we're doing it. and then your jelly is ready to go. So you're gonna, once it hits that and it's got that concentrated level, then you can put it into jars or put it into a jar, let it cool, and put it in your fridge. So I'm gonna go grab my apples and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got some apples picked and I've got them in some water. I personally don't use any sprays, so I don't need to put anything. If you do, or got some from the store, you might want to put a little vinegar in there or whatnot. But next, my first thing I want to do with the apples is I want to cut them up. Now, it's important to note that depending on what color you want, a little bit of what kind of apple you have also depends. But basically, if you have the apples like cut into eighths, like if you were, like using one of the apple press things, you'll end up with more of a pink juice usually. And if you crush them up really well, you'll end up with more of a red juice. I kind of do in the middle. What I personally do is I halve the apples and then I take them and put them in the food processor because I have this pulse thing and it cuts them up pretty good size and it makes really easy work of it. So that's kind of my favorite way to do it. You can also just use a knife and slice them however you want. There really isn't a bad way. So I've got that chop function and it goes a couple times, but it gives me bite-sized apples. And there we go. All right. So as you can see, they're kind of like rough chopped or whatever. And my pot is just right over here. And all I'm doing is dumping them into the pot. So I got a couple more batches of that to do. So I'll put you on fast mode and I'll bring you back for when we add the water and get these to a boil to soft. Just a moment. Okay, so we got all of our apples chopped up, makes pretty quick work. And so that's what it looks like, doing a smallerish batch, or at least smaller for me. So I've got my apples. Now I need to add some water. And again, with the water, you want to just put it up so it's barely covering the apples. If you accidentally put too much, it's okay. It'll just add to the boil time because at the very end, the water is basically boiled out. Now I add a little bit more water because it's a pretty good sized batch. Okay. All right, and so you want the water so it's just barely covering the apples. So here is mine, you can see, just barely covering. Set you back down here. Okay, then I'm gonna put this on the burner and I'm gonna turn the heat up. Now I've mentioned a few times and I will continue to mention heavy bottom pan. It is so important. Another key, so that it doesn't stick and burn, another key element of that is making sure that you're stirring constantly. Because remember, all the apples are sitting on each other and we've only got a little bit of water in there. And the apples haven't been heated up and released their own juice yet. And so you don't want it to burn the bottom of the pan. But all right, well, I'm gonna let this get heated up and stirring occasionally, or frequently, I guess. And especially the higher you have the temperature, the more you'll want to stir. If you're a little nervous, you can drop it down to like a 7 or 8 or 6 or something like that. But I know that this pan is a good pan and the bottom does not burn. I am so thankful for that. And I'll bring you back when we get to a boil because I want to boil these till they are just soft. So be right back. Okay, so as you can tell, I've got steam behind me, and so I've been simmering for a little bit and they're starting to soften, so I'm gonna show you what that looks like. Now keep in mind, if you haven't cooked apples before, they do get a little foamy, and that's just a natural thing that happens, so don't be worried about that. But okay, let me get this lid off and I'll show you what I'm working with. All right, let me give it a quick stir. Okay. All right, I'll bring it over. So here are what the apples are looking like. And as you can tell, they've gone a little bit of pale and they're starting to get nice and soft, which is exactly how I want them. So if I were, sorry, trying to put you back. Okay, so if I were making applesauce, I would keep going till they're softer and then run them through a food mill to separate out the stems, seeds, etc. If I were doing same with apple butter, I would continue cooking that. If I were just doing a modified apple juice, when I strain it like I do with the jelly that I'm about to show you, then I would just can that. So just kind of putting a little tickle in your ear of other things you can do with apples. But since we are making jelly, I'm going to show you the straining out part. Make sure and give that a good stir so we don't get any sticking. And I did turn the heat off because sometimes I've got a little burn right there. Sometimes the little pieces will pop up and get you, and they're really hot. So now let's talk about straining. So this is my straining device. Now I'll show you layer by layer. It may vary whatever you use, because obviously it's what you have available or your budget or anything like that. I use what I have. I think there are like special straight jelly straining kits that are like real cool and like have their own setup and all that. This is the way I do it now. How I used to do it is, you see this little handle is, this is just a cotton towel or whatever. It is damp because the liquid flows through better, but I would take that and I would put everything in there and I would tie it, literally tie it here and have it hang. And that worked perfectly. That was when my batches were a little bit smaller. So this is my little cloth. Under that, I have this strainer. Now, this one is a fine mesh sieve or whatever. I like it because it has more surface area and I find that it drains better. But it's also not strong because the little thin thing. So then I have my regular strainer, colander, whatever. And then all of that sits on one of these, which I like, especially for large food prep because it has the measurements. This is a Cambro. They're ridiculously expensive for what they are, but I used to work in restaurants way back in the day, and we always use those in the kitchen, and so I use them as well. All right, so we'll get that in there. And if you're doing a smaller batch, sometimes you might want to just go ahead and dump it in there. But since this is not so much of a big batch, usually my batches come up to the top, but it's pretty good size and I don't feel like burning myself and my counter and creating a huge mess. So I'm gonna grab my ladle. So I'll put this as close as I can get it, so that way we don't make too many messes. There's my ladle. And so I will go ahead and just scoop this in. And I think you should be able to, let me see here. There you go. You should be able to see in a little bit the juice that starts going down. Now the pulp that is stuck on the top, you can use that for a whole bunch of different things. You can feed it to chickens, you can make applesauce with it, you can dehydrate it and powder it for breads, you can feed it to chickens, you can throw it away, you can compost it. Honestly, you can do anything you like with it. One key thing to note is when you're making this, you want to make sure that you don't boil it too much, because what will happen is as the apple pieces continue to break down, the liquid won't be able to pass through, and because you'll have effective applesauce, and separating the juice out of applesauce is near impossible. ask me how I know. But okay, let's see here. Will it all fit in one? See, can you see the juice that's starting to come out here? I'll give you a better view here. See it filling up there. And put this back. That's a pretty good view, okay. I have to switch out this one. Let's see here. And you'll see a lot of juice come out right away, but it's still important to let it drip for the 4 to 5 hours because you want to get all the essence of the apple and all the pectin and really get it to release not just the water that we put to help the apples get going. This is draining pretty good. I'm at that key point where I'm like, can I make it all fit or should I get a new one? I think I'm gonna try and go for it. Hopefully it works. Let's see here. An important thing to note too is the cool thing about this jelly, and I haven't tried it yet, but I am absolutely determined next year, is you can cook it with mint leaves, or add the mint leaves, sorry, and then you get a mint apple jelly. And that sounds really exciting. Oh, I don't know if it's gonna fit. Let's see, I'll just keep ladling it in. What I might do to give me more surface area is take out that smaller one. So if I take this and pick it up, and this is how I used to tie it to the thing. So let me move this over there. And since I'm so close, I'll just let it go through that. And then let's see if we can pour it. So fingers crossed I don't embarrass myself on camera. Okay. I'm also getting my facial with all this steam. Okay. So far, so good. Make sure I don't overdo it. Oh, so close. Oh crap, did I over? Ah. I was watching the front and not the back. Okay. All right. Ow. Let's see here. The one thing without the smaller strainer in is that it doesn't drain as fast, but then it also doesn't hold as much. Maybe I just need a bigger sieve. So I'm gonna pick it up. You see how it's coming through there pretty quickly? Oh, give me a little room. Let's see here. Get me a little bit of room here. Let's see. A little bit making a mess. I probably should have just got the second one. Let's see, will it fit? All right. Let me try that just one more time. It's pretty heavy. Come on, get in there. All right, the last stretch is upon us. Let's see here. All right, try and crown this up, because if you have it hanging, the liquid will travel along it. I kind of put it back at a little angle so I can put it right there. Let me rinse my hands because they're sticky, and I'll finish the rest. Okay, we can do this. Okay. All right, get all the last morsels. Come on. Okay. All right. So now we wait. Like I said, you want to strain it for the 4 to 5 hours. And obviously a lot of juice comes off really quickly. But honestly, it's really good to get the last juice as well. I'll give you kind of a picture of what it looks like there. Let's see. We're at almost 2 quarts of juice. And remember, whatever we ultimately end up with, we will take the amount of cups, and then make it with a ratio of 1 cup juice to 3/4 cup sugar. And then we'll rapid boil that for about 20-30 minutes, depending on how big the batch is or how much water is in there. Then we'll have our jam. So I'll be right back in 4 to 5 hours. And I already lost my light. So I'll lose my light. See you soon. All right, so our pulp has been straining and we've got all of our juice separated, and I'm so excited to get to the jelly making. So of course you could do many things with the pulp at the top, but I'm gonna set that aside for right now. And then what I have left over is this beautiful juice. Now this juice, I measure it in this, and it's actually exactly at 2 quarts, which is really great because each quart is of course 4 cups. And so that makes that really easy. However, if you don't have that, what you can do is, if you have like a large half-gallon mason jar or even a regular mason jar, depending on of course the volume, usually on the side they'll have a listing of cups, or if you have a large measuring cup, or if your food processor measures cups, or whatever way is convenient for you to measure how many cups you need. But you definitely need to know, and it's probably a good idea to write it down. I always recommend, writing down how many apples you had, like weighing it or whatever, and then just so that you don't forget. But anyway, so I have 2 quarts or 8 cups of liquid. And so the ratio is, for every cup of liquid or juice, you want to put 3/4 scoop of sugar. And to figure that out, you can do a few things. Like, so I have 8 cups. I could just do 3/4 scoop 8 times, and that works perfect. Or you can convert it, of course. And so for 8 cups of juice, I would use 6 cups of sugar, which is the way that I'm going to do it. But as long as you get the ratio, that's all that matters. So the first thing we're going to do is take our beautiful, lovely pink juice, and I'm going to pour it into my pan. I'm using the same thick bottom pan for exactly the same reason that I have been using it all day. So I'll set that aside, and now I'm gonna get my sugar. Personally, I always use the Costco organic cane sugar. Any sugar works, of course. And I'm gonna do 6 cups of that. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, slightly under 5, but that's okay, and 6. Okay, so then I will set that aside. Now it is time to turn up the temperature. And so the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the sugar dissolves in the juice, which takes a second at first. It'll be kind of gritty, but especially once it heats up, then it'll become a cohesive mixture, and it's nice when it gets like that. Once it gets all incorporated, you're gonna wanna go for a vigorous boil and boil it approximately 20 minutes. We'll get to probably the hardest thing if you're brand new is knowing when it's at gel point. And so you might be wondering, you keep saying gel point, what does that mean? That's at the point where, because obviously you saw the juice, right? And even right now with the sugar in it, it's very liquidy. That's the point at which the liquid has boiled off and it is concentrated enough that the end product is firm, or will set, sometimes you'll see. And so one of the biggest complaints is I tried to make jelly and my jelly didn't set. And so of course you only find that out the next day when you go to scoop some, and it's more like, or it is exactly a syrup as opposed to a jelly, and hard to spread on bread and all that stuff. And there's a considerable amount of work, so you always want to make sure that you're not doing work for nothing, right? So in order to test gel, there's actually 2 different methods. And my preferred method is the spoon test with a backup method of temperature. So the spoon test, and I have I'll try and give as much detail as I can, but I do have a separate, it's like a 2.5-minute video on it. But you want to look for sheeting, which is where you'll take a spoon. So I already put my spoons in the freezer. You'll want to have them frozen. Then when you think you're getting pretty close, you just quickly dip the spoon in, pull it up as fast as you can, and you watch to see if the drips are kind of coming fast or if they're kind of combining and slowly sheeting off of the spoon. Now I understand, because I've been there, that it's hard to kind of understand exactly what that means, and it's kind of hard to understand exactly what that looks like. And so another way of checking, though I'm not sure as reliable, to be honest, is to use a thermometer. And so I have this thermometer, I think it's from Good Cook or whatever, but I don't know if you can see, but it actually has, you see right there where my thumb is, I don't know if you can read that, but it says jelly, and that's at 220 degrees. And that is above boiling, which is only achieved when it is thick enough to get hotter than boiling. And so what you do is you hold the thermometer in there and burn your hand off and get the temperature. So I like to use both of them. I like to monitor the temperature, and then when I feel like I'm getting really close or I want to know, then I'll use the spoon test. If it's your very first time making jelly, I kind of recommend, like I put 3 spoons in the freezer, but I would recommend putting a lot more, because you have to have, like, if you use a spoon and it didn't sheet off, you obviously have to rinse it, dry it, and then put it back in the freezer for at least 5 minutes, because if it's not cold enough, then it won't like change the temperature or drop the temperature enough to tell if it's gonna sheet or not. There's also a third method, I guess I should also mention, and I've done this one too, but that's where you take a little bit and you put it onto a plate, and you kind of see it like once the temperature, because you put like 2-3 drops or so on a plate, and then let it get to room temperature, so not above boiling, and kind of move it around and see how that, basically you want it to be the consistency of jam or jelly, I'm sorry. And but yeah, so that is honestly the hardest part for anybody that is beginning, or honestly even, you know, a few years into jelly and jam making, because both jelly and jam, you have to get to that gel point where it will set up. If you are I'll be honest, I've never used commercial pectin, so I'm not sure exactly how that works. I believe the process is that you get it warmed up kind of like how it is now, and you put it in there and then stir it, and then it's done, something like that. I'm honestly not exactly sure, but I personally like just taking the extra time and just boiling it, and yeah, it always turns out well. But I think what I'm gonna do, as much fun as it is to watch water boil, or jelly boil at least, I think I'm going to babysit this and stir almost constantly, and then bring you back when we're kind of, you know, getting a little movement. So I'll show you what this looks like just for right now. I can feel that the sugar's all absorbed. And oh, one thing to note is that when it starts getting higher in temperature, the color will get darker and you will get foam. And so some people don't scrape off the foam. I scrape off the majority of the foam. So I'll show you that when we get to that part. But I just don't want you to be surprised or whatever. So I'll show you what it looks like now, and then I'll show you in a little bit. So this is, it's kind of hard to see because of the steam, but it's already a little bit darker and starting to heat up. And so I'll just keep stirring it and bring you back soon. Just a moment. So I also, sorry, I also wanted to mention that in this time period, you also want to prepare your water bath canner. Now, I have a water bath canner that is massive. I have a pressure canner, and I also have an automatic canner that can do pressure canning or water bath canning. And I think if I were doing this on my own, I would just use the automatic canner because it's very convenient for me. But since if you're new and learning this, you probably don't have an automatic canner, and that's quite the investment. So I'm going to use a regular canner. Now, one thing that's interesting is that I actually prefer to use my pressure canner as a water bath canner because of how tall it is. My water bath canner is very large, but I just like the way that the lid fits, and I like that it's a little bit thicker, and so I'm going to use that. And so when you're water bath canning, what you need to do is make sure that your water covers the top of the jars by at least 1 inch. If you are new and you're not good at identifying how much water you'll probably need, it's not a bad idea to get another pot with boiling water just so you don't have any delays. So what I'm going to do in between constantly stirring is I'm going to take my pressure canner lid off. Just as a reminder, even though it's a pressure canner, I'm not using it as a pressure canner. The difference is no matter what you use, it has to have a bottom tray. That's exceptionally important because the jars will break or something if you don't have that. Now, an actual water bath canner has a little basket that you can lift up or down, but I like using this one, so I'll show you how that works, but it's the exact same. So I'm gonna while I'm stirring this, I'm also going to take this, fill this up with water and get it started, because it's gonna take a long time for this to get nice and boiling. And then as you can see, I've got, maybe you can't see, but I've got a nice boil going in here. Another way to be able to tell when you're getting close to gel stage is you'll see the term a boil that you can't stir down. And it's not guaranteed, but it's kind of representative of what it looks like. And it's literally no matter how much you stir, it's just boiling out of control. So I'm gonna put you on fast mode, attempt to have 2 arms to stir and fill my canner. If I would have thought about it better, I would have done it before I started. But here we go. Also turn down the heat on my oven a little bit so that I don't get too crazy. So just a second. I also want to say that this is a great time to go ahead and get your jars and start heating them up. Personally, I have really, really, really hot water, and so I'll just set up my sink and I'll kind of rinse them and put them in hot water and have them sit, and that'll end up working really well. Some folks do where you put the jars empty inside of the hot water and then pull it out, or if you have an actual water bath canner, it has that rack, and so setting them above it. But basically you want to avoid thermal shock. So if you grab a cold jar out of the cabinet or something and you're putting 220-degree liquid in it, that's asking a lot of that glass. That looks good. Also, you'll notice as I am rolling boil this jelly, I do not have a lid on. And the reason for that is because I do want all the steam, that's the water, I do want that to come out, because the apple juice and the sugar will concentrate, and that's how it gets thicker, able to achieve that above boiling temperature. So I'm gonna grab my canner and put it on the oven on high temperature. And again, that is a pressure canner, but I am going to put the lid on because I want it to heat up faster. But I like it because it's tall, especially with water bath canning. It just drives me crazy especially sometimes like I'll double stack depending on how many jars I'm making. And then like the water boils over, it gets all over my stove, and it's kind of a pain. So this is my favorite thing to do. And then, because usually the process is you make sure your jars are extra hot, your filling is extra hot. You put it in there. Once the water starts boiling over your jars, that's when you count your time. Then if you have a regular style water canner, when it's done, you pull up the rack. And you know what? Let me get you an example. Okay, sorry about that. I had to run to my other room. So this is the official water bath canner. And so it's got a thin aluminum, but on the inside is this rack. And so when you're filling it, you can have it sitting like that. So the jars are either a little bit submerged, but not all the way. And then also when you're done canning, you bring it up and let it sit for 5 minutes, and then you pull them out, because you want to make sure that the temperature changes that happen too quickly, that's where you run into problems with the seals or run into siphoning or whatever it may be. But that guy's really big, and honestly I just like using the pressure canner. It has the bottom piece just like that has. But anyway, so I'm just gonna keep stirring here, and I'm going to warm up my jars, and my canner is coming to boiling water, and it is so hot in here and humid. So anyways, I'll see you back in a minute. Okay, so I have got a boil that I cannot stir down, and I am going to show you, and then we're gonna test for gel. Real quick, a few things I grabbed is my jars are behind me in the sink, heating up. I've got my funnel, how I'll put it into the jars. I've got my jar grabber to put them in and out. I've also got my rings, and then I've got my actual lids heating up in with the water. I believe the new recommendations are, the previous recommendations for old lids was to boil them, and the new ones are that you can use regular, but I always heat them up in the water, and I never have any problems with seals, so that's what I do. So, okay, what we're gonna do is we're going to, this is gonna be hard to show you, so I just wanna apologize in advance, but it's also one of the most critical points, because I'd hate for you to do all this work and then have syrup in the morning and not beautiful jam or jelly. But I'm gonna show you what it looks like when I say, obviously you can understand what it says, a boil that you cannot stir down is literally a boil that you cannot stir down. And I tried to turn the temperature down a hair so you can kind of see it a little bit better. And so it's not, no, it's really hard. You don't know, let me see if I stop stirring it. See how it's hard boiling like that? The bubbles are really, 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 really small. And even though I'm stirring, it's still just bubbly and all that stuff. So we're gonna do our first time, let's see, I'm trying to think how the best way to do this. We're gonna do our very first time of trying the gel test, and I hope that it's easy to see. So let me, sorry, I gotta keep stirring this. So I'm gonna grab a spoon out of the freezer. Oh, where did I put them? Oh, there we go. So I've got a nice frozen spoon, and I want to quickly dip into it and see if it drips off. So you see how that's boiling? So let me give it a stir to try and reduce it a little bit. And I'm going to dip it in quick and bring it up. Let's see if we can show you. See how they're kind of sticking together, but not as much as I would personally like. So I'm going to cook it just another minute, and I'm going to retest it. But I'm also going to put a thermometer in there, because I always like that as a backup one. Now, one thing I've learned to do is to use a pair of tongs and put my thermometer on there. Because believe me when I tell you, inside of here is very hot. So I put that in there, and then I am also still stirring because you have to stir all the time. And it takes my thermometer a little bit to get the temperature, and then I'll try and pull it up really fast and see what it says. Let's see. I'm reading 200, so maybe I didn't have it in there long enough, or it hasn't reached the temperature. At this point, I've been going about 20 minutes. Oh, I was reading, I think it was 2 or 4 degrees. I had to look really fast. 2 or 4 degrees above or below the 220, so I'm not sure. I might be there. I've noticed that this thermometer, the last time I made plum jam, which is one of my favorites, it was gelling, but it wasn't showing gel stage. So I'm showing 219. So I am above boiling, but I need to be just a little bit higher. Let's see, I'll turn this up a little bit. I'm also getting 219 there. Still getting 219. Usually the retest is only in about one to 3 minutes or so. I did turn the temperature down a little bit because I want to do the spoon test and make sure it's not just the foam. But let me see here. I'm getting between 219 and 220. So I'm going to go ahead and grab another spoon, and I'll bring you over and show you the spoon test. Another thing I like to do too is took my thermometer out, but it has jelly on it, as you can tell. And so as it cools down, I'll touch it and kind of get a feel for how thick it is. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen very fast, but you know. All right, so I'll get you, and now let me get a frozen spoon, and I'll move pretty quick so that way we can see. See, get this frozen spoon. Oops, grab the wrong one. No, that was the right one, okay. All right, and we'll try and go quick. I turn the heat down. See how it's kind of sheeting off there and not just running off? Another thing you can do, I've got my fan going, but I'll set it aside, and I also put it on my little spoon holder, because what that does is it generally has a cooler temperature. It's not on the hot stove, and so as the jelly cools down, then you'll be able to get a better idea of the consistency that it's going to be. I think that it's ready. I'm just putting the thermometer in here so I can show you too, because I know that finding gel point is about the hardest thing when you first start. And so I have a lot of compassion for that. Actually, my biggest video ever in all of my YouTube history is that 2.5 minute video of showing gel point, because it is such a hard thing to figure out. Oh, and I have 220, sorry. So let me, and you know what? You can actually see, it was dangling off. Let's see if I can get it to, no, it's not doing it. But you see how you can, like, see how it's thicker? Like it's not, like it's sticking to my finger. I don't know if you can see that. It's really good too. So here's the spoon that I had. Let's see here. You can see that was the plate that the jelly was on. And you see how you can kind of move it, like, see how it like kind of globs to get, see how it's hanging from there? So that's jelly-like material. And that's just from, let me show you one more time what it looks like. This is before I stir it down or attempt to stir it down. But that means that our jelly is ready to go. So that's awesome. Again, I know it's difficult, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn the temperature down. And then I'm gonna start filling my jars. And for apple jelly, you want to leave a 1/4 inch headspace. And what that means is on your jar, a 1/4 inch from the top is where you're gonna fill the jelly up to. What I use is in the jars, I look for the part where they all, there we go, where they all meet. So it's actually 3 lines. See over here, it's the 2, but right here it's 1, 2, and 3. And then I follow the top one to where it's the biggest. And I consider that as like about a 1/2 inch. And so I go in between there. I don't know if that makes sense. There isn't like, you don't get in trouble or whatever if it's, you know, if there's a little bit of a difference. It's a science, but it's not always exact. If you're in doubt, you can always absolutely get a ruler. If you have any foam, which I don't have too much of, I have some foam, but not a whole lot. No, actually, I'm not getting that much foam. A bunch of bubbles. Then you can strain that off. But let's go ahead and fill our jars. So let's see, I'll put this one back in. Get a new hot one. Need to get my ladle because I don't know what I was thinking, and I put it inside of the dishwasher. All right. So I'm going to take my jar and, oh, I gotta turn my fan off because you don't want to breeze. Take my jar, I'm gonna put this in here. I'm going to grab a paper towel because that is gonna get really hot, and I find oven mitts are too bulky. So I've got a paper towel, and so then I'm gonna fill it. And let's see, let me take this out first. Okay. So let's put that in there. And it's kind of a little bit of a learning curve on how high you fill it up. Sometimes you go just a little below, and then, because you can't tell, because obviously this is in the way. So I'll find my area with the 3 lines. Oh, it's hot. And then I'll lift it up. I can see, oh, I need a little bit more. And you can also see to about where that comes. I don't know if you can see on the inside. And then that'll help you determine. I need a little bit more again. Whoopsie. All right, that should be pretty good. It's a little glass, so if I need to touch it up a little bit more with some extra, then I'll do that. And then I also can grab my chopstick, which is what I use to get out air bubbles. It is liquid, so it is hard to have the air bubbles. Whew. Should not pick it up without this. Then I just run my chopstick around and make sure adjust headspace as needed. And then I'll fill all of them up and top them off with a spoon. So I will put that in fast mode so you don't have to watch all that. So just a moment. Okay, so from the 8 pints I had, I have 3, 6, 7 half pints to kind of put that into perspective. and I've made sure that they're all the proper headspace, and I gave a little taste and it was amazing. Oh, I love apple jelly. It's so fresh, like a crisp, fresh taste. Also, this is the spoon that I used to fill, like make sure everything was even. But if you look, see how thick that is? See how it'll hold up like on its own or even on my finger? And so that's what you want. That's gonna be really thick jelly and really amazing. Okay. I couldn't resist, but now I gotta wash my hands. Okay, so now I'm gonna take that same paper towel and I'm going to get some vinegar, wherever it says vinegar, it's from Costco. And I'm gonna wipe all of the rims, and that's just to dissolve if there's anything on the rims. Be careful, the jars are hot. And so these are gonna water bath for 5 minutes. Now you might be wondering what water bath, when that starts. So that's when it's boiling after you put everything in. So it's not 5 minutes, it might be like 10-ish minutes or whatever. So now I'm gonna get my lids and put the tops on and then get them into my canner. Okay, so I will put these on here. And then when you're putting the lids on, I always like to line up the top, like to the logo, I can't talk. It's a personal preference of mine, but to be honest, it doesn't matter at all. I just like the way it looks on my shelf. For years, I would always forget to do it, and now I always remember. All right, and then I will get my rings. And you want to do them, I have to use this. You want to do them finger tight. So that means that you don't need to put the pressure of an ocean onto it. Meaning that you don't have to secure it like your life depends on it. But you do want to make sure they're tight, but you don't have to like throw out your wrist trying to put them on. So do that. As a side note, if you are using the electric canner, I find that likes them just a little bit tighter. So I just give them just a little extra, I don't know, tug or whatever. All right, and then the last one of these. I can hear my canner over there is nice and hot. Okay. All right, so now I'm gonna take off this lid and I'm gonna lower all of these into it, and then we're gonna wait for it to boil over them. So just a moment. When you open the canner or anything that's really hot, make sure and open it away from you. 2 reasons. 1, steam doesn't burn your face. 2, all the condensation will drop into the thing. So this is how I open it. But you see, I did drop some, but you see all that liquid that came off? All right, now we're gonna get our jar lifter and put these bad boys in. Okay. Sorry, my timer went off and paused the video, but I'm just putting my jars in. And it looks like, so far, my boil hasn't broken. It's a little reduced, so I want to make sure it's a good boil. I'll turn that up just a hair. All right. So if you have really hot product going into a really hot canner, the recapture time is pretty small. But if you, maybe it took a little longer or your water wasn't as hot, which you want to make sure they're within range with each other, then it should bounce back really fast. I always put that lid on just because it really does help it heat up a lot faster. And so then once that is rolling boil, and of course it's over an inch over the top of the jars, then I will set a timer for 5 minutes. And when it is done, if you were using a regular water bath canner, you would bring the basket up and then let it sit. If it's your only load, you can also turn off the burner. But since I'm using this one that doesn't have a basket, I will still turn it off and I'll lift it to another burner and let it sit for 5 minutes. Then I'll pull them out. Then I'll put the jars in a draft-free, temperature-stable area for the next 24 hours where they can sit and be undisturbed. After that, I will check to make sure that all sealed, which unfortunately I have pretty good luck with. And then I will label them, date them, and put them in storage. So let's see if it's boiling over my jars. My glass is steamed up. It's at a low boil. It's working up to a high boil. Let's see here. Oh, my grandfather clock is going off. Let's see. I'm debating. I feel like it's only going to be like 30 seconds, but then if I let go of the video, then I got to turn back on. And maybe I'll just bring it back and not waste your time. I'm sure it's a long video. If you made it this far, you are awesome and a trooper. And I really hope that your jelly turns out so amazing. And if not, or if it does, leave a comment and let me know. If it doesn't, leave a comment and me and the community can try and troubleshoot for you. And if you're liking this video or find it helpful, definitely leave a comment, because that helps me get exposure and helps me grow. And I really appreciate that. Let me check just one more time. No, I'll bring it back in just a moment. I'll bring it back. Okay, so we are, oops, let me take that lid off and I'll show you what I know you know what a boil looks like. I'm just showing you a rolling boil over the things. So be careful, it's hot. The steam is hot, my fingers. Maybe I should use gloves far more than I do. But so you see there how it's boiling over the cans. It looks like there's probably 3 inches. It doesn't matter as long as it's over 1 inch. And I know the Amish do it to just like the shoulders of the jar or whatever, but I always or generally do it till it's over. But that means that it's boiling, so that's when I can start my 5 minutes. So I'm gonna put my lid back on, turn off my video, set my timer for 5 minutes. Then when my timer goes off, I'm gonna turn my burner off and move it to another burner, and I'll show you that. And then after another 5 minutes, I'll pull them out and they'll be beautiful jars of jelly. Okay, so my timer has gone off. It has been 5 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my oven off, which is very difficult because it's right next to it, whatever. I'll get it off in a second. And I'm gonna move it to this other burner that isn't hot. Oh, it's pretty heavy. Conversely, you can also just turn it off and let it sit if it's getting too hot. And then I'm gonna take the lid off and then let it sit for 5 minutes, and that's when I'll pull them out. Okay, bring it back in 5 minutes. Okay, so my timer has gone off. It has been sitting and gradually cooling. So one thing you're gonna wanna do is get a lid and hold it upside down to catch any water as you pull it out. And then you retrieve the beautiful jars, out of there. They look so pretty. And I'm putting them back in the corner, which is a draft-free area for me. And I'll show you in just a second what that looks like. And again, if you were just wanting to make jelly for your fridge, you would have stopped. Obviously, you wouldn't have done the canning stuff. You would have put it in your jar, let it cool, and then once it is fully cooled, you put it in your fridge. Or freezer, I guess. If you're putting it in the freezer, you definitely want to not fill it as much so that it has room to expand. And then enjoy it on some amazing bread, or basically anything. All right. And I'll show you me set this down and I'll show you what they look like. All right, so there they are. And I'll let them sit there for, like I said, 24 hours undisturbed. And then I will check the seal to make sure that they all sealed. And then I'll take off the rings, label them, date them, and put them in storage. So this has been a long video, so I really appreciate it if you're still with me. And like I said earlier, I'd love to hear how your jam turns out, or your jelly turns out. And thanks for watching. Have a great day. Happy canning and gardening. Bye.